You've said that there's been a proliferation of media outlets, and there's also been a not a commensurate growth in media ethics. Which has followed which? In other words, has the proliferation of media outlets caused each of those media properties to try to seek out its own niche, and as a result,
Hmm.
perhaps appealing to smaller groups rather than the wider public interest?
Hmm.
Or has that happened as a result of the fact that there's been a breakdown in Indian society in faith in the national enterprise and a retreat into more local identities?
No, no. Let me put it this way. There is no single reason for why um, a certain kind of phenomenon takes hold, right? I used to actually work in the Indian media landscape. This was back in 2005, and I joined the Indian media as a journalist. I was working in India, and I joined at a time where we were really at the peak of a boom in the media. The media was respected. Um, there was, a general sense, at least amongst middle class, that you could look to journalists for a kind of public service, correct? What's happened since then is a new style of journalism, and by this I mean specifically on television, which is truly such a mass medium in India, right? Journalism there has kind of taken on this mantle of being not a revealer of facts, but much more of an opinion shaper. There are some um, there are some really well-known TV hosts who have built a connection with their audience on the basis of really kind of ginning up emotion. Um, at times, I would say appealing to their fears, creating fears, um, stoking division in a way. These are not always very obvious things that happen. They can be subtle, although if you're looking and if you're aware of it, you can see it. The language is not always very coded. Let me give you an example. um, India, over the past few years, has been seeing an intensification of communal division. I think it's very important for me to make clear right from the off that communal divide has been at very very central to the creation of India, right? The creation of modern independent India. We had a partition that created India and Pakistan following the departure of the British, and this was based on a religious divide in the country. So the communalism you're seeing today in India is not something that was created, in the last decade. It is something that is part of our formative journey as a nation. All right. What's happened in recent times, though, what was once considered impolite, or actually what was once considered antithetical to our identity as a nation, um, bigotry, open dislike for people of minority religions, all of that once upon a time was considered really not within keeping of the Indian ethos. Those limitations have kind of been broken. I remember I was speaking to a journalist once for one of the reports I did, and she said, what was once considered rude even in the privacy of your own living room is now being said out on the streets, out on social media, and frankly, even in newsrooms, even in news studios. So, if I come back to the example I was saying, when I was talking about the fact that the language is not very coded, there is a bizarre kind of new phenomenon I have seen as an observer of Indian media. I see this across broadcast news. This obsession with the term jihad, right? Now, jihad obviously has a very specific um, religious significance in Islam, and it has kind of been um, co-opted and kind of it is misinterpreted by people who don't understand what that means, and actually it's been given quite a violent kind of connotation. And on Indian broadcast these days, it is not you won't be surprised to actually see segments in which anchors or guests are talking about things like love jihad, land jihad. I kid you not, spit jihad. I don't even know. It took me some time to understand what that meant. And what the anchors are basically doing are leaning into a notion that India's Muslim minority are somehow waging a war against the majority, who are Hindus, of course, that they are somehow waging a war against the majority by falling in love with Hindus, by buying land and creating homes in what might be considered Hindu areas. And this notion of the jihad has just become a frequent television segment that I see. And I think it is very unjournalistic. And as I said, this is not just about reflecting facts on the ground. This is actively ginning up division and fear and hatred. And I think that's a big problem, which is afflicting the Indian media. And it's a real shame because, like I said, our democracy, the Indian democracy, deserves a robust media that can reflect really the fundamental founding premise of India, which was that it would be a secular nation for people of all religions. So yeah, that's where we are.
Meenakshi, you actually have perfectly segued into our first user question, which is from Redditor Abyss256. And they ask, what do you think of the Islamophobia espoused in Indian internet users and India world media outlets like the Hindustan Times?
What do I think about it? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me start by saying that, as I mentioned earlier, Islamophobia is not a new creation in India. It's been a reality for a while, right? And I don't want to shy away from this. We are a very diverse nation, and it takes a feat of humanity to come together and hold these various religions and people together. It is actually the shining success of India that we have managed thus far, and obviously one hope it continues. Now, Islamophobia, like I said, has kind of become unleashed. It is no longer considered rude or frankly disgusting to espouse such notions. And unfortunately, that has now leached into public discourse on social media, be it Twitter, Instagram, be it even our political parties in their campaigning, using that kind of Islamophobic rhetoric or Islamophobic imagery in mainstream. I do think it is a problem, and this is where I go back to the notion of media ethics. A large part of Indian mainstream media has been co-opted, and we can discuss the reasons of why it has happened. But Indian media has been co-opted. A large section of Indian media has been co-opted. And this kind of language and this kind of division and this kind of stoking of hatred is now considered news copy. And it is a very big problem. It is not journalistic at all.